Very, very happy to see everyone here today. I think it's very exciting to have so many teachers and our colleagues from the schools to want to know more about what can we go about doing to support children with special needs. So I would like to just start off by um, acknowledging my colleagues who are very much a part of me and a part of my team as we engage in this piece of research. So for today, I will be talking about classroom support for students with special educational needs, what we know and what else can be done. So like I said, I want to acknowledge my colleagues. So I've got colleagues from MOE, colleagues from NIE, colleagues from KKH, as well as colleagues from NUH. And what you will find is that all the speakers for the breakout session, as well as for the second keynote today, are all part of the same research team. We bring in the expertise from a few disciplines. So we bring the expertise from general education, from special education, from psychology, as well as from pediatrics. And part of the reason why we have such a big team coming together is because the very process of supporting children with special educational needs is one that requires interdisciplinary approach. We need to be thinking very broadly about how can we go about supporting them holistically. And so for that reason, we are coming together, wearing different hats, but in a very important way, sharing one heart, and that's the heart to support children with special needs. And so I'm very, very glad that you are here today to share what we have, to actually learn from what we have gathered so far. So I think what we know from, this is not research, but just from local statistics, is that there is a rising trend of children with special educational needs in our classrooms. We know that from a national standpoint, we have about 2 to 3% of our age cohort of children being identified with special needs. What I hear from teachers, be it teachers in preschools, all the way up to lecturers in IHLs, is that many more are unidentified. I think what I want to do today is also to say that, well, as much as we may not have identified them, some of the strategies and some of the things that we can do for supporting our students doesn't require diagnosis to really support. And there is so much that we can teach us, that we as professionals in schools and teachers can be doing. So what you see on the next slide is this question of, now what is a child with special needs? And with this itself, there are many ways to think about it, but the starting point that I would like to employ in Singapore is to look at our MOE. This is published by MOE, some professional practice guidelines. Now that's led by Professor Mariam Aljunid, one of our members of our study team. And I think within this framework, a child is considered to have special needs if the child meets 3 main sets of criteria. The first is that the child needs disability diagnosis. So for example, a child has autism. The second is that the child not only has a diagnosis, but the child has difficulties. So difficulties learning in relation to children their age, difficulties in accessing the educational facilities, or some other aspects of impairments that impacts upon their functioning in school environments. And the third aspect for meeting this category of special educational needs is that the child requires resources which are different or additional what is conventionally available in a school environment. And what you will find from this, what we do know is that with some children with special educational needs, we can quite easily identify them. So those with physical differences, I think, so for our students with with facial features or with body features which are different from ours, we can see that. For students with sensory impairments, we very frequently can see that. Not so much with hearing. But we also have less clearly identifiable aspects of special needs. So those with emotional and behavioral regulation difficulties. For our students with major cognitive difficulties, and that normally comes with self-care difficulties as well, that's also another aspect which we can recognize as educators pretty fast. And then, what you will find also is that there can be a group of children where we can hardly identify their special needs. And these are the ones with very mild learning or attentional difficulties, which may not, at first glance, become very easily identified. So I think what we do know is that we do have a good number of these children. We also have, I think, if I were to reflect upon my experience of working in this field for the past 15 years, at least within the Singapore education system, has been a very big change. So I started off my career at NIE just at the point where the support for special needs initiative was being enacted. So that was just after Minister Tharman's announcement in 2004. And then in 2005, over at NIE, we were developing a course to help equip schools support students with special needs. And so I think at that point in time, and I can recall upon that with a smile, the awareness was very different. I think the awareness at that time was quite low. So I still remember running my first class on supporting children with autism. And so I was asking them, this was a class of about 20 children. So I was, 20 teachers. So I was asking them, how many of you have heard of autism? And I think about 2 hands as far as I could have remembered. This is very different now. The level of awareness is different. The level of support at that point in time was also very different from what we have now. And in terms of the interest in this area, I think what we sensed in the first few batches of teachers who were trained to support children with special needs was that there was some degree of anxiety over whether this can be done, whether this should be done. Now, if I were to fast forward that 15 years, things have changed a lot, like I mentioned. So I was having a meeting with the minister of in the MSF ministry, and what he was saying is that what we hear nowadays is not so much a question of whether people with special needs should be supported, but rather the question of how much more should we be supporting them. So I think at the level of awareness across all levels in society, we are seeing a general awareness as well as a desire to want to support them. I think in terms of the support that we see within schools as well, we know that there is so much more support, not only in terms of knowledge at the class level, at the level of the teacher, but also in terms of systems that we are setting up in schools, and particularly in primary schools. As I get to hear about how you have organized your SDTs, you have organized your case management teams. So with this itself, there are a lot more within school structures that we are seeing. And I think in terms of interest, the very fact that we were looking at a wait list, I think very early into the announcement of this talk, I think that tells about how the context has changed. So we know, I think in many ways, that we know a lot more about how can we go about supporting children with special needs, about also what children with special needs need. But I think we've moved from the we don't know to the point where we know that there is so much that we really need to further understand. So with this itself, a study was funded by the Ministry of Education to further understand how our children with special needs, with special educational needs, adjust to school? How are they supported and how are they developed? So this is a study that we very affectionately call transcend, which is the transition and adjustment of children with special educational needs. So in this study, we have right now close to 600 participants. We are expecting to go beyond that number pretty soon. We intend in this study to study across time in 3 waves. So from wave 1 to wave 3, this is for each child, we'll be looking at the child's development over a 3-year period from the lower block of primary to the upper block to upper primary. We want to be looking and seeing how the children are developing, but also we want to be thinking about their school support. We also want to be thinking about the contributions of the family context. And this will be via direct child interaction, also via parental report, as well as teacher reports and interviews and classmate feedback. What I want to do is to have some reflection on, now that all that has been said and done, what can we as teachers do? So one of the things that we learned, and this was a study that we conducted in early intervention classrooms and which we are going to extend within this study. And what we learned from a specialized early intervention classroom was that the child's engagement was very, very surprisingly totally unrelated to the child's characteristics. But rather the child's engagement in the learning was very much a function of whatever was going on in the child's environment. I think this is very much in line with what we understand to be going on, especially when we put on an ecological lens. So in every classroom, there are the students. There is the child with the special educational needs, but within the classroom, we also know that there are the teacher factors, how the teacher teaches. We also know that there are the physical setting aspects of the classroom where the child is seated. We know that there are peers. We also know that there is a curriculum and the kind of resources that we can introduce. So what we learn based on an ecological framework is that very frequently in primary school environments, we may not have that much time to work individually with the child. But because we know that the child is very much influenced by factors within the environment, by making changes to the environment, we very frequently can support the child as well in terms of his or her behavior and learning. So I think one of the things that, and this is something that you will see in the slides once we share that, would be things that we can do within the physical environment of the child. So this could be the sitting, where the child sits, the changes that we can make to the physical environment, particularly if there is glare that can affect some children, or ambient noise for some children with auditory processing difficulties. We also have learned that teachers play a very important part. So teachers can, I think this is one of the top strategies that teachers are saying that they are doing, understand the child, understand the strengths, the interests of the child, also understanding what the child knows, and then understanding the needs and accommodating to the needs. In terms of curriculum and resource factors, is thinking about now how can we be tailoring examples to engage the child, where there is a need to customizing the content, particularly if the child is able to understand it, but the content may not be a medium that the child is understanding, that is able to access. Introducing specialized resources. Very frequently for our children with autism, they need schedules to help them to better engage and to know and to be able to predict what's going on in the class. Peers as well. In terms of thinking about how can we involve classmates for the physical safety of the child, as well as the learning, as well as the social engagement. I also want to just take my last minute before I wrap this thing up, thinking about broader school environment. So one of the things we did, and this, oh, I can't believe it's been 9 years ago, but we actually entered 2 schools in Singapore to try to understand now what else can be done. So the teachers can support, and I do understand that in our midst today, we have also school leaders. So what else can be done at the school level to facilitate this support? I think one of the aspects which that we've learned from the 2 schools we have been was the transition support between levels. So the information transfer, staff thoughts about student allocation, thoughts about staff deployment, communication leaders can have with staff, flexibility in disciplinary procedures for children with SEN, as well as having processes in place in terms of procedures for managing and supporting students with SEN in terms of when you're selecting staff, at staff induction and at training, and of course collaboration, and of course to work with the family. So I have spoken a lot, and I just want to end off by really thanking my team. We work very hard. We have a fairly large team. So I had a large team of co-investigators. I also have a large team of research staff who are very, very much involved. So I would like to very much thank you all for being a part of this session. And I think it just leaves me to tell you that we are moving now into the second part of today's program. And so very shortly, you will find yourself, just stay where you are. There's no need to log out. We will be automatically routing you to the respective breakout rooms in which you have signed up for. And then after that, just also stay there, because we will be routing you back into this big room for first the break and then the second keynote. All right, so see you all in just a bit.